Welcome back to the Metaphoric Music Review. Got another really solid week, like a bunch of big name, high profile releases, great Sunday classic. It's just been a solid couple weeks right in a row here. As always, I'm Gabe.
I'm Dan.
I'm Darin.
Talking about the music that Pitchfork thinks everyone should be talking about. If you don't know, Pitchfork is an online music magazine. It's basically the loudest voice in music today. Each week, they review a bunch of albums. Most get pretty mediocre scores, but a couple get this coveted BNM or BNR label. Dan, what is that?
BNM, Best New Music. BNR, Best New Reissue.
Right. So those are the releases that Pitchfork thinks all lovers of music should be talking about, and that's exactly what we're going to do. But we're also going to talk about a few notable pans, some gems that Pitchfork is either underrated or ignored completely, Pitchfork's weekly Sunday classic review, and now Pitchfork's BNTs or best new tracks. Important to remember, though, you don't need to know or care about Pitchfork at all to enjoy this podcast. We're going to tell you everything you need to know about the week in music. So, Darin, what are we talking about this week?
For the week of May 8th through May 14th, we will be discussing Slowdive's Self-Titled, which was a BNM, Alice Coltrane's World Spirituality Classics 1, the ecstatic music of Alice Coltrane, Churiyasange Tinanda, which was a BNR.
Good job.
Very much a mouthful.
Very good.
Yes. And we'll be discussing Girlpool's Power Plant, which was a BNM. And for the Sunday Classic, we had Jay-Z's Reasonable Doubt.
Yes, of course, the big news of today, the exact day we're recording, is the passing of Soundgarden and Audio Slave frontman Chris Cornell, but we will talk about that and pay tribute to him on next week's episode. So, to kick this episode off, this week we got 3 BNTs, best new tracks, like I said, which Pitchfork typically uses to highlight promising singles. What we like to do with these is listen to them right now, right at the top of the show, and share some quick reactions in real time just to decide whether the upcoming albums from which they're taken could be worthy of that coveted BNM. Unfortunately, we're going to have to skip Everything is Recorded's Close But Not Quite on this very packed episode just for the sake of time. That leaves us with 2. Darin, what's first?
We've got The National with The System Only Dreams in Total Darkness. Let's listen.
We're in a different kind of thing. All night you're talking to God. And I cannot explain that. Any other way.
Pitchfork has been heaping praise in lots of BNMs on The National for the majority of their nearly 20-year career, and the band's last couple of albums earned them significant mainstream success as well. They'll release their highly anticipated 7th album called Sleep Well Beast on September 8th. So what were your thoughts on The System Only Dreams in Total Darkness?
It was all right. Got that sort of post-punk revival type feel to it. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it, but, it was okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I've always kind of hated them. I've always thought they were kind of like Coldplay tier, just sort of really polished. Like they make quite anthemic kind of stadium type stuff. This didn't. I don't know. This sounded a little different. It was more enjoyable. It did have that post punky vibe. It was like if Coldplay, instead of ripping off Radiohead, was ripping off Nick Cave.
yeah, I could see that. That's pretty accurate.
Yeah, Gabe, I think your brother likes The National, right? Or he did for a time, correct?
I am not sure. I've never met a real person that likes The National.
I could have sworn he was trying to get me to go to a show. Anyway, I remember checking them out in the past, but I just haven't really followed. And, this song was all right. I got kind of a bit of a Strokes vibe there, throughout, which is cool. It just didn't necessarily blow me away or anything, but I guess I didn't really expect to be blown away by The National.
Yeah, it was catchy enough to where I feel like if I listened to it a couple times, I might end up kind of singing along to that little hook part. I don't know. It was okay. So, Dan, you haven't really checked out The National much in the past?
I've listened to that last album. I can't even remember the name. It's that head that's in the mirror or whatever.
Trouble Will Find Me or something like that.
Yeah. I listened to that when it came out because it was getting some heat, but I never, I never really dug it. I mean, clearly I didn't even remember the name of it, so they've not stuck with me.
Well, I mean, was this single? I just feel like it's probably going to get a BNM because all of their shit gets a BNM. But was this single enough to make you at least not dread checking it out?
Yeah, I mean, I don't dread it. That song wasn't bad. It was a little over polished, like you said, but it's better than all the normal shit we have to listen to.
I mean, I'm only dreading it because it feels like it's going to be something like an 8.3 B&M sort of thing, you know, where maybe like a quarter of the album is actually interesting to listen to, you know what I mean?
Yeah. What's up with like the very, very dramatic titles here?
Yeah.
The System Only Dreams and Total Dark. I mean, it was basically like a pop song. If his voice wasn't like such a spooky baritone, it would just be like kind of a catchy little pop song.
Yeah, well, we ready for the next one, which is Fleet Foxes with Fool's Errand. So let's go ahead and take a listen to that one.
It was a fool's errand, waiting for a sign, but I can't leave until the sign comes to mind.
Fleet Foxes haven't released an album since 2011's critically acclaimed Helplessness Blues, but they've now earned a BNT for each single from their upcoming LP, Crack Up, which will be dropping on June 16th. A little side note, Fleet Foxes have been away as long as LCD Sound System, but nobody calling this one a reunion. Any thoughts on this song?
I hated it until that super necessary piano outro. That made it a perfect song.
Yeah, I mean, it sounded pretty basic, you know, Fleet Foxes. Nothing really in particular, but the outro thing was sort of... when I saw the song was 5 minutes, I was like, okay, it's interesting. But then after, like, again, 3.5 minutes, like when the actual song was done...
Yeah,
I know. We talked about that other one, right? And the other one was like 8 minutes, and after a 4-minute normal song, it just noodled.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I hate Fleet Foxes, and this didn't help that at all. I mean, like you said, that piano outro. What purpose did that serve? It was just like, we get it. You can play the piano moderately well. Like, Thank you.
It was, super pretentious, kind of. I mean, just to make it like more grand. But I mean, if every song on this album is going to have like a noodly, pointless, like dramatic outro, it's going to be so exhausting. Yes. But you know, even that 8-minute song we listened to before, the first part, which was like the song, was much catchier than this. I thought this was very bland. I mean, just straight up. I mean, this is just straight up coffee shop music.
Yeah, it really,
you know,
coffee shop was that's great. Did you guys watch the video? That's how I did it. It was as dumb as the song. It was just like interpretive Tai Chi or something on a mountain for 8 minutes or whatever, 5 minutes. It was awful.
God.
So, well, I'll take it. We're not excited for this LP. I mean, it's pretty much guaranteed to get a BNM, right? Except, I mean, I guess Mac got 3 BNTs and got panned, but I don't see that happening for Fleet Foxes. Do you?
I didn't think it was possible for Fleet Foxes, but I mean, honestly, sometimes I can tell, you know, Pitchfork will love this, even though I think it's trash. This is just like not very good.
No.
I mean, that was like very bland, just uninspired. I mean, you guys remember when I was talking about, you guys both disagreed, but now that we've talked about the Grateful Dead, you remember how I said the other song was kind of like, it sounded like the song part, the shitty part of Grateful Dead songs, where it's like, this is going to turn into a 30-minute, you know, jam. We just got to get through this. Don't you think it kind of sounds like that?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, I guess so. I'll agree more.
The problem is that the jam part is not as electrifying as the Grateful Dead. You know?
Yeah, the jam part is just a piano mournfully playing in the distance. So I'm starting to seriously believe this might not get a BNM, and I kind of hope it does not. Although we'll probably have to talk about it as a notable pan, so we're fucked either way.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go to Hawaii that week.
Well, are you excited at all, Darin, or are you at least willing to check it out?
No, you know, like, I hate this to be like, you know, that guy that's just over it, but I mean, I feel like Fleetwood Foxes is just, it's over, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to,
Yes.
I don't want to listen to, it seems like everything that they put out now is just going to be rehashing of old stuff with just a little slight, you know, I guess a little outro added into every song, you know?
Yes. There are a lot of like weird comebacks happening.
Yeah,
like
that's what it feels
2011 is like rearing its ugly head again. Not that 2011 was so bad, but it's gone. it's done. I think we can leave it. Anything else to add to Poor Fleet Foxes here, or should we move on to the reviews?
No, let's move on. They're garbage.
Right, just heard a clip from our first proper review this week, Slowdive's self-titled. Just remind you that when Pitchfork reviews things, they review them on a 0 to 10 scale, somewhere on 8.2 or 8.3. They give it a BNM if it's a new release, BNR if it's a reissue of an old album, anthology, greatest hits, something like that. We got a little bit of everything this week, so Darin, what's first?
Right. First up, we had Slowdive with their self-titled, which was released by Dead Oceans, and on Monday, got an 8.6 BNM with a review by Sean T. Collins. Bit of background on Slowdive. Everyone knows that they are one of the shoegaze genre's big three, along with My Bloody Valentine and Ride. And their 1993 album, Souvlaki, is universally seen as a shoegaze dream pop masterpiece. But Slowdive's actual tenure as a band was a lot less glorious. It's important to remember that the term shoegaze was originally intended to be an insult. It's referring to the fact that shoegaze bands awkwardly stared at their feet while performing. Of course, My Bloody Valentine was always adored by critics, but all the bands that followed in their wake were frequently accused of ripping My Bloody Valentine off, and Slowdive was no exception. In 1995, the band tried to move beyond shoegaze's lush walls of sound with the abstract ambient minimalism of their Pygmalion album, but they only succeeded in dividing fans and called it quits soon after. Fast forward to 2014, and Slowdive suddenly found themselves beloved by basically everyone. Each of their albums, including Pygmalion, were now ranked among the decade's best. They reunited to perform at the Primavera Sound Festival that year, began touring everywhere, and announced their plans to record a new album. So, 22 years after their last album, Slowdive's self-titled follow-up is finally here, and amazingly, it's earning rave reviews from everyone. Something they never got to experience during their initial run. So, what are your previous opinions of Slowdive, and how are you feeling going into this one?
I like Slowdive. Souvlaki is a great album, Pygmalion. When I heard that they were making this record, I figured I would never check it out because it would just be, throwaway garbage. But here we are.
Yeah, I kind of felt the same. It was like, I think they're great. I don't know. I'm sort of undecided. I should have revisited their early stuff because they are great, but it's kind of like, you get into like a My Bloody Valentine phase and then you're so hungry for more. You just kind of end up like going to Ride and, Slowdive, and it's not like as satisfying, and it's still really well done, but I can just never decide if I like really like them or if My Bloody Valentine is so good that my love like spills over a little bit. So I don't know. It's like I enjoy their records, but thinking about listening to a new record from them 22 years later was like I was totally uninterested. What about you, Darin?
Well, I like Slowdive, and I'm kind of torn now that the way you sort of described that. Maybe I did start to like Slowdive because there was just not enough My Bloody Valentine to go around. But I would say between out of the three, I would probably put Slowdive at number 2 over Ride. That's just
me too.
Yeah,
I would too.
I do admit I haven't really listened to Pygmalion. I was just a really big fan of Souvlaki, and that was just kind of enough for me. So going into this, I didn't really have high expectations. Not like I did with like My Bloody Valentine coming out with a new album.
Right.
And I don't know why. I just didn't expect. I think I got what I expected. Does that make sense? My expectations were rather low, and I think I got what I thought was going to happen.
Ooh. All right. You're jumping a little bit ahead of the gun here. We should just try to describe the sound of this record first, and try to avoid just saying it sounds like Souvlaki, if that's possible.
Yeah, I mean it sounds like other Slowdive albums. There we go. But I mean it's a bit more like produced sounding. I think I wish I would have like you said, Gabe, revisited the older stuff. I haven't listened to it in a little bit, but if memory serves, this is like a bit more produced, but not to the point that it's like, overproduced or anything. It's just like, I think it's more that it's 2017 and it's just easier and cheaper to record things. But it's like a polished up version of Slowdive from 22 years ago.
Would you agree with that, Darin?
I mean, I guess there's definitely, it's got like that 2017 production value in there, but I would argue that Souvlaki sounds great too, even for being from 1995. So I think sound wise, you've definitely got the shoegaze feel going on. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You've got the kind of like low, not quite a whisper, but low singing voices. Mm-hmm. Hard to discern like what's being said.
Right.
So the lush kind of wall of sound, I feel like that's rather prominent, but then the album sort of shifts a little bit as it goes along. Would you add anything to that, Gabe?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of torn all week because to me it felt a little bit, like if you go back to listen to Souvlaki, I haven't in a little while, but from what I remember, I mean, it was like just perfection as far as like production goes. I mean, not in the sense of like recording quality, but it just felt like the arrangements, that's why people listen to shoegaze. That's like almost more why you listen to shoegaze than the songs. It's for like these incredible sonic textures, like these lush walls of sound, and I felt like I couldn't decide. Like it felt like it was a little thinner here. I mean, there were points where it was definitely not just creating like a huge wall of sound for sure. There were other points that felt like a little bit lazy, and I couldn't decide if, I don't know. When My Bloody Valentine was working in 1991, you couldn't just buy guaranteed shoegaze pedals. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like nowadays you can. There's a huge market for people who want that like lush, like distortion, but like this wall of, dreamy distortion. You can just buy pedals specifically for that. And is it just that it's less impressive hearing this nowadays?
I mean, there's a pedal that's literally called Loveless, for sale.
Is there really?
Yeah, there really is. Yeah, I mean, maybe it just isn't as impressive because every, guy with $200 can recreate that sound, whereas back when My Bloody Valentine did it, it was a big deal. So that could be.
Yeah, I mean, did either of you guys feel like the sort of production was not as, it didn't like blow your mind like the first time you ever heard Souvlaki or something? And do you think it's because it's not as good, or do you think it's just because we're so used to this?
I think it's just being used to it, The wall of sound like blew my mind, the first time I heard My Bloody Valentine, and then subsequently the other shoegaze bands, just to see that other people could do it. But now, I know it can be done and stuff, so it's not the first time I heard it. So yeah, I didn't get that feeling anymore, but I don't think I ever would.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the advantages to like My Bloody Valentine's legacy is that they didn't put out an overabundance of albums. You just don't feel like there was too much My Bloody Valentine.
Yeah.
So that what we have from that time is just elevated because like it's so, we have so little of it, I think. And, to hear, Slowdive come back 22 years later, here's what I was expecting. I was expecting that wall of sound. And I think that's not what I was expecting when I first picked up Souvlaki. You know what I mean? I did not have any expectation like that.
Yeah.
So it's hard to feel like it, impressed. I mean, I'm sure that they weren't using Loveless pedals on this album. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure they know how to make their sound and make it sound genuine. It's just that it's not as groundbreaking.
Yeah, I think that's right. But I think like in even in 1991, nobody thought you would want like a reverb pedal that was so powerful it would just like basically turn your guitar into like just a wash of wispy sound. Now there's like tons and tons of shit like that. So not just having a Loveless pedal, but just the technology that's available, inspired by people like Slowdive and My Bloody Valentine. All right, so I mean, how did you guys do with this record? I mean, we agree it sounds kind of shoegazy. It's definitely more Souvlaki than Pygmalion or anything experimental at all. It's kind of going back to that dream poppy thing. So did you like it?
I mean, I liked it. I didn't hate it. I definitely didn't hate it. I thought it was fine. There wasn't like a song on there, like is it like Machine Gun from Souvlaki?
I don't know what song you're talking about.
Well, there's, there just wasn't a song, I guess, in particular that really stood out in the same way that some of the tracks on Souvlaki. It all, I wouldn't really say any one song was necessarily way better than the others. You know what I mean? It just kind of, it had a decent flow to it. I wasn't like bored, and I didn't feel like I was. Yeah, I guess one of the things you worry about when you hear a band that's coming back 22 years later is that they sound old, either vocally or whatever. And you could tell there was a little bit of age, in his voice, but it wasn't like terrible,
Yeah, I pretty much agree with Darin. I came into this expecting to hate it, and I didn't hate it. I didn't like love it. It was just kind of like pretty good. There isn't like a huge standout track, but I think it's pretty obvious listening to it that like Sugar for the Pill like is the single and like should be the single. I don't know if it maybe wasn't like, my favorite track on the thing, but it's the one that like, I think stands out a little bit more than the others. But yeah, I mean, I definitely enjoyed it a bit more than I expected to. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, by the time that I listened to this, I had started to hear a lot of really good things. So I was like very uninterested, and then I just kept hearing people gushing about it. And so I kind of went into it like sort of hopeful, and I don't know, found myself like enjoying it a lot for some reason. I mean, it's not, there's like nothing groundbreaking about this, for sure. Nothing on here is really as good as anything on Souvlaki, and yet I found like the songwriting really just, I don't know, very catchy, like when the on that track, it's either Star Roving or Don't Know Why, where like the beat kind of like changes. It's always like this simple kind of beat you could like make in GarageBand or something, but when the beat sort of shifts, it's like, just, I don't know, it's catchy. I started to think like maybe it's just that shoegaze is great and that there's so little quality shoegaze that I was like happy to have an excuse to listen to another shoegaze record, because I don't want to listen to all these like bullshit shoegaze ripoff artists. Like, it's kind of nice that one of the originals came back and dropped this so I could just get my shoegaze fix in 2017.
Yeah. I feel like as long as you can take like a really deep breath and give like the airiest vocals possible, like they can just keep on making records like well into old age, and they'll be okay.
Yeah. But don't you think like the songs are, I mean, the hooks are pretty catchy in a weird way, right?
Yeah, it is. And I think that's part of it is like, there's only a few shoegaze bands that actually are pretty good, and it was nice to get something from one of those bands. But I just don't see the like staying power of this record. I don't see myself listening to this album in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, like Souvlaki,
Right. Dan, would you use the argument that like we already have Souvlaki, we don't need another one? Is that a fair argument here?
I mean, to like me, who, I'm not like obsessed with shoegaze. I don't like love Slowdive. So if I ever feel like listening to some shoegaze, I'm gonna listen to Souvlaki. I'll never listen to this record. But I mean, this record's good enough that like if you are like a big Slowdive fan, it's nice to have like a something else to listen to when you get bored of the two before. I don't listen to them enough to get bored of those two other records though, so this one's just kind of not for me, I guess.
Yeah, some hardcore fans will object to you excluding their debut just for a day from that, but write your hate mail to Dan there. I don't know, it doesn't feel like worthy of joining the ranks of the rest of their discography that much. At the same time, it's like totally enjoyable, it's catchy, it's like just, I think that's it. I think there are like a bunch of problems with this, but just at the end of the day, the sort of hook writing, the songwriting is just really like top notch still. I almost feel like, stuff like Sugar for the Pill, which we talked about as a BNT, and I was sort of like unenthusiastic about it, but it started to kind of work its way into my ears, and I started to find it very catchy and like sing-alongable. And I don't know. I just started to think like if 1993 Slowdive, arranged that song and recorded that song, it would be like excellent. I mean, do you think there's any possibility of that it's just like if their older selves were, working their younger self magic on some of these songs, it would work better?
Well, that was going to be my question. Like, what if this album came out in 97 or something like that, or whatever, like followed up Souvlaki? Would it have a different feel to it? Would we think of it differently just because it had come out so soon after Souvlaki?
Well, Pygmalion came out after Souvlaki already.
Well, I'm just saying, like, maybe what if this album came out instead of, because Pygmalion moved in different directions.
You mean instead of? Okay.
I feel like this is much closer in relationship to Souvlaki than it is to Pygmalion.
Yeah. So how would we feel if it came out like during their original run, basically?
Right.
I don't know. Dan, how would you feel? Would that change how you feel about it?
Would it be recorded and sound like the 90s, or would it sound exactly like it sounds now? Because if it sounded exactly like it sounded now, I think I would be impressed by how good the recording quality is and stuff. Okay. But if we
futuristic,
if we ran it through the mid 90s filter, I don't know. I think maybe I would like it more, just because it would have that. I almost feel like bad saying that, but I think I would like it more if it had just come out, in 97 or something, like right after Souvlaki. Just because it would. Yeah, it doesn't this wasn't good enough to make up for a 22 year wait.
Right.
Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, I guess so, but I wasn't waiting for 22 years, so I kind of don't care.
Yeah, me neither, so it's hard to say, yeah.
If you were really waiting, I think this would be disappointing, but if you just kind of were like us and not, it's sort of like a little treat. It's kind of nice, I think. I would put it in the nice category, and I do think that if it came out during their original run, they would have done a better job on the sonic textures of it, which I think are a little bit lacking and not up to snuff for them. Did you have an opinion on that, Darin? How would you feel if it came out during their original run?
I think that I would have liked it more. I think you're right. It probably would have sounded a bit sonically more, more like what Souvlaki sounds like.
Right.
I think that, to Dan's point and your point as well, we weren't waiting for 22 years, so that wouldn't even be part of the conversation. I think we would have discovered Souvlaki, and we would have came to this follow-up record, and we would have been just as impressed and just as blown away. Yeah. I think it would have had plenty of staying power. But here, 22 years later, it's not quite there. I like it's nice, but it's it's a little unnecessary, I guess.
Okay. So an 8.6 BNM, how do you guys feel about that?
I think it's too high. I don't really think this deserves the BNM. This shouldn't be anyone's first experience with Slowdive. I think I completely agree with what both of you have said. It's nice, but it's a little unnecessary. I'd give it a 7.3 or something. It's not awful. It's not bad.
Boy.
It's just not.
Make sure you put Dan in the subject line when you're talking about your hate mail.
It's just a do we need it kind of situation.
I do think that 8.6 is a little bit high. I think Slowdive has earned the reputation that anything that they put out deserves attention. They may not be My Bloody Valentine, but they're in second place, and that's definitely something to talk about. Second place out of 3, right?
It's not too bad.
Yeah, we pitched before when Pitchfork did that 50 best shoegaze albums list, and we were all like, the fuck, there aren't 50 good shoegaze albums. There's 3 bands. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think they're great. I think they're a great shoegaze dream pop band. I wasn't waiting for 22 years, so I think this is just kind of a treat. I don't think it stands necessarily alongside of their earlier stuff, but I think that they are still pretty great at writing lovely dream pop melodies. And another thing I meant to mention is that maybe part of the laziness, it feels like there's more synth work, filling out the lushness here, which almost feels like a cop-out when you're a shoegaze band.
It's a little cheating, yeah.
Yeah, you want that to be lush with just crazy. You want to make distorted guitars sound like a comfy fucking pillow or something, right, instead of using synths, which it's easier to do that with. So Yeah, it just felt sonically like a little bit underwhelming. The songs, I think, are still there and still sort of worthy of them. So, I wouldn't bitch about it. I think it's like a cool treat to have. So, I don't know. I would knock it down a little bit, like an 8.3 or an 8.4 if that's not too much quibbling. But I would keep the BNM. I think it's kind of nice.
Agreed.
Ready to move on?
Yeah. You just heard Alice Coltrane with World Spirituality Classics 1, the ecstatic music of Alice Coltrane.
Turiyasang Itananda.
Which was released by Laukabop on Wednesday. They got an 8.8 BNR in a review by Gene Pelly. Some background on this. Alice Coltrane was a jazz pianist, harpist, and composer known for her deeply spiritual and cosmic approach to experimental jazz music. In the early 60s, she met and married famed saxophonist John Coltrane and helped push him in the cosmic directions he would take at the end of his career. She actually joined his band in 1966, and following his 1967 death, launched her own critically acclaimed career as a band leader. In the mid-1970s, Alice retreated from the public eye and started a Center for Eastern Spiritual Study in Southern California. Then in the mid-80s, that center established an ashram, which is essentially a monastery, and Alice served as its swamini, or director. In this role, she led devotional chants and ceremonies and began composing and recording original pieces from these traditional chants, which she would then record on cassettes and provide only to members of the ashram. These 4 very limited cassettes recorded between 1982 and 1995 are basically impossible to find, but this new compilation makes selections from the tapes widely available for the first time. So you guys got any previous familiarity with Alice Coltrane?
I do not really. I guess, I've listened to basically all John Coltrane stuff, so I guess I must have heard her playing piano at some point, but I don't know. I've heard a lot about her. I feel like I ought to have checked her out sooner.
Yeah, pretty much the same. Definitely heard the name. Definitely listened to a lot of John Coltrane. Just haven't really checked her discography out very much at all.
I have a little bit of familiarity. I know the album. It's with Pharoah Sanders, A Journey, and it's like a big word, Satchidananda or something. And that record's good.
Don't we get a track on this compilation called that, don't we?
Yeah, we do actually. But actually, when I saw Sun, their opening music, like before they came out and stuff, they were blasting Alice Coltrane the whole time. So that recently reminded me to listen her out.
They have a song called Alice, like in tribute to her.
Yeah, they do. Yep, on Monoliths and Dimensions, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, describe the sound of this record.
Well, first off, I wanted to ask: do either of you guys feel like weird about listening to this? Do you feel like
a little bit,
like invasive, a little bit?
Yeah. Especially the way the Pitchfork review kind of describes how it was played like as you went up the path or something like that, like on these speakers along the trail. It felt like you needed to be in that, you should be doing that sort of stuff. Not that it should be like widely distributed and like on my phone to be listened to,
Yeah.
Yeah, it does feel like a little weird. Like I almost even feel almost like a little like, if someone just walked in and didn't know I was listening to this, for this show and everything, I would feel like a little try hard, like, oh, he's going to listen to some, Indian chant music or whatever. Right. So it did make me feel like a little self-conscious listening to it.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel it's weird. Like I don't feel invasive at all when I'm listening to like other outsider art. This is kind of like outsider art, but the outsider just happens to be like, a great musician and composer.
An actual genius, yes.
Yeah, but yeah, she just like is making this privately for basically, what we would call friends and family. I mean, the members of her church, probably how she thought of them. And I don't know, I feel like weirdly bad. I don't know why I feel bad for like peeking in to her private, devotional music.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, this was released on those limited cassettes, like we said, and it just kind of feels like that's what she wanted. And I'm not so sure that she would have wanted this as some compilation for the entire world.
Yeah. Okay, so we were going to describe the sound. How would you guys describe it?
Well, you definitely have. I think spiritual is definitely a good, title for it, because you have a lot of, like, I don't know if the way you could describe it is like monk's music or something, like a lot of chanting, the tribal kind of music, a lot of, I guess, what are they called? Chakras kind of just being repeated over and over again. Meditative, a lot of the music sounds. Instrumentally, I mean, you have like strings. She plays a harp on a song. It's very a lot of world music. I guess you could somehow throw it into that.
But we also get like some synthesizer.
Yeah, it's like a world music with like a synthesizer over it sometimes, which is kind of cool. It's got like a real new agey kind of feel sometimes because of that. But I think if people come into this, I think everyone knows the name Coltrane, and so if you come into this expecting some like jazz, you're gonna be you're gonna be left out in the dust because there's not really anything. Like John in here at all.
Yeah, nothing jazzy about this really. It does, sound like sort of, chanting, traditional type music. But then, I mean, Pitchfork's review is good on this, I think, which is that they say that like it's sort of mixing this, and she's sort of recomposing like these traditional chants and devotional music and stuff. And she's sort of adding like this, African American choir influence to it. You know what I mean? It's like they talk about how she, grew up like singing in the choir in Detroit or something, or her mother was singing in the choir in Detroit or whatever. But there's a lot of that I guess I can imagine is not common in like Hindu devotional music, but is these like sort of black church qualities to it. You know what I mean?
That was definitely, a good point that the review pointed out, that it's like she's brought her own flavor to it. And I think that's what made it very interesting to listen to. Like every track I was kind of interested in, like, what is she going to do with this? Like it starts off with just like Om Shanti or whatever. And then it just kind of grows, and it's very almost like symphonic in the way that it, builds and builds and different things happen. And you just kind of get lost into it. And I really, this is going to sound pretty stupid, but like I felt like entranced by it, like I felt like it really did have like an effect, which is precisely what it would be after.
It does kind of have that like trancey kind of feel, and I think that's on purpose. I have listened to some Indian music before, like Ravi Shankar and stuff, and it does all kind of have that. It's got like almost like a similar kind of feel that like drone music or something has, which is, we were talking about Sun liking it before. So it does kind of have like that feel, it doesn't like sound like that. It just like has that same kind of feeling to it.
Yeah. Yeah. But some of it is like remarkably composed, I think, kind of like Darin was saying, where like the first track like builds and sort of changes and evolves. Some of the tracks are very kind of repetitive, where it's like just sort of a chant or something like that sort of goes, and it's still quite I don't know, like lush and instrumentally fascinating, I think. But other tracks, I think the tracks that I like the most, like the first track, second track, Om Shanti, kind of like built and went somewhere, where like these voices kind of come in and this like choir type thing comes in, or especially on Om Shanti, which I think is like absolutely incredible, where she's sort of like singing lead, like like a preacher or something, like over the top of these like sort of lush background vocals. And it's sort of an interesting mixture that I honestly hadn't heard before. I also wanted to mention that there's kind of like did you guys notice like kind of a lo-fi like tape quality to this? Would you describe it in those words at all?
Yeah, I did notice that a little bit. It did sound like something, and I didn't read that it was, cold from cassettes and stuff. But yeah, it did kind of have like a feel like I kind of thought it was like recorded in her house or something. I didn't read the story, but yeah, I definitely caught some of that.
Yeah, it gave me the vibe that like they were, I don't know, like all of this was happening at the same time in the same room, like almost like somebody had like a not quite a field recorder, I guess, but you know, like it was intended to be performed as an ensemble, I guess.
Yeah. So, I mean, did you guys enjoy it? I mean, Darin, you got entranced. Did you convert to Hinduism or anything like that?
Not exactly, but I thought about going on a pilgrimage for sure.
Close.
The pilgrimage from my hometown to the place where I work. This album was just perfect for that.
Yeah. Well, did you enjoy it? Did you have fun?
I did. I really did. I don't know if I would throw it on, when I'm driving necessarily.
Or at a party.
Yeah, I mean...
What about the gym?
There was
if everyone was showing up in like hoods and, monk outfits, and maybe I'd hang around, and as long as there's a bag of potato chips there, then I'll be... No, but seriously, I think it's great. I'd probably put it on maybe like background music, good reading music. It's very interesting. It doesn't when you hear the term world music, I think, to me it doesn't really sound all that appealing. But to hear somebody kind of put a very interesting twist on it, it makes me very interested to hear the rest of her body of work.
How'd you do, Dan?
I liked it. I think I kind of agree with Darin. I wouldn't drive around listening to this, and I'm not going to listen to it all the time. But it would be great, just kind of reading music or sort of incidental background type things. But I enjoyed it. Like I said, I felt like a little weird, a little like invasive or self-conscious listening to it. But I think in the privacy of my home, I would feel that less. I listen to most things at work on a speaker. So yeah,
it's totally hypocritical that I feel like invasive or something like that. It's like like I'm sure the Shags were horrified when they found out like normal people were listening to their music, and I don't care about that at all. But
don't bring that up around Darin.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, I'm gonna bring them up here in the.
Oh no!
Oh man!
All right, but it is really amazing. Kind of, I think it's like sort of incredible. I can't believe like nobody was, the most of the world was not hearing this until now. It's like this fascinating mixture of, what we might call like sort of a world music or an Eastern inspired music with like strings, harp, synth. I mean, apparently Alice Coltrane had not sang on anything before this. She felt that like the Lord was telling her to sing or something, and her voice is like fucking awesome for some reason. Yeah. I just love the sound of her voice, especially those like really, like I said, more composed tracks where it's sort of like building and she's sort of like singing like the leader role with like sort of lush vocals around her. And I mean, like, I don't know. I hadn't listened to her much before this. It makes me really want to check out more of her because you can just tell like her composition skills are incredible, especially reinterpreting like ancient, chants and stuff to make them so dynamic and interesting. And at the same time, like you said, Dan, it has that drone quality without sounding like drone, but that drone quality of like, you can really get lost in this. So, an 8.8 BNR, God, I might bump it up a little bit. I think the BNR is totally necessary. I hope we would all agree on that, but I might bump it up to like a 9.2, something like that.
I agree the BNR is definitely necessary. I think I'd leave it. I think 8.8 is good. This is something that I think the BNR is good for. It's something that, most people have not listened to something that sounds like this. And it was nice to, have a new experience. And I think that's perfect for the BNR.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Gabe. I think I would probably bump it up to like a 9.0. I think that this has, masterpiece-like qualities. It's just that, not enough people have really heard it yet. I think the more and more time spent with it, the more it kind of solidifies itself into that 9.0 and beyond quality.
All right. We ready to move on?
Yeah.
right, up next we have Girlpool with Power Plant, which was released by Anti-Epitaph, and on Friday got an 8.3 BNM with a review by Jillian Mapes. A little bit of background. Girlpool used to be a minimalist indie rock duo from LA's DIY scene who earned minor acclaim for the quiet intensity of their lo-fi lullabies, which consisted of only guitar, bass, and vocals. Good comparison of their earlier sound might be the indie folk of Dear Nora, which we discussed on a recent episode. Girlpool actually named a track on their first record, Dear Nora, in tribute. For their follow-up, however, Girlpool has added a drummer and entered more traditional 90s indie rock territory. Pitchfork agrees that the band now sound a little more like everyone else, but argues that their vulnerable voices remain front and center, and that their introspective lyrics have only gotten better. We talked about the BNT track It Gets More Blue on a previous episode, so recap your feelings about Girlpool going into this record.
I'm pretty sure I shit-talked that song a lot.
Yeah, you have no memory of listening to it whatsoever.
I mean, no, I remember it. I just don't remember how mean I was.
Yeah, I was really mean about that song when we talked about it.
Yeah.
I was mostly just insulted that you guys didn't like Big Thief but liked this, and I found it just a little bit derivative and just kind of like, I don't know, this normal indie rock thing. So that was my only familiarity with them, and I was not looking forward to this at all. How about you, Darin?
Yeah, I had no familiarity with them at all. That I gave some praise to that BNT track, and as you can see, it got a B&M. So obviously, I know good music when I hear it. Obviously,
Finger on the pulse of
the best new music.
Exactly. So how would you guys describe the sound of this record?
I'll let you have this one.
So it's, I guess I should just put it up, out front here. I ended up enjoying this a lot. Like I had no intention of doing it. I meant to hate it. Like all week I was like, I will hate this, and I sort of enjoyed it. But to me it sounds like, on one hand there's sort of this just typical like indie rock, like sort of early Built to Spill style indie rock, where it's sort of like these sweet, like sort of upbeat, major key melodies, vocal melodies that is, and sort of like strummed chords, strummed power chords or whatever, and it's kind of that rambling indie jangle pop kind of a thing. On the other hand, there's like a real quality to this, which is like reminds me very much of early emo, like The Promise Ring or Sunny Day Real Estate a little bit or whatever. Where like the main riff is sort of like a little American football type, like plucked riff sort of. It's just like, it sounds like very early emo to me, before emo turned into what most people think of emo. That sort of weird mixture where indie and early emo were very, like, much more similar than most people are willing to admit. What would you guys add to that?
I mean, I think you covered it pretty well. It's just, I'm sure this comes as no surprise, but I did not enjoy this at all. I mean, it just sounded like yet another one of these like 90s throwback kind of cutesy indie like twee pop kind of bands to me. I didn't see anything. This could have been one of a thousand other bands.
Well, you're wrong. They immediately sort of reminded me of like the qualities that I really enjoyed in like Mitski's music.
Okay.
To what you had said, Gabe, the sound of the bass, the sound of the guitar with that kind of like thumping, almost like a high treble on the bass guitar.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily mix in well. It doesn't like blend into like a nice, wonderful sound. They're not like the most powerful vocalists or anything like that. So there's definitely that very indie DIY vibe going on, which
whispery Elliott Smith. Sometimes.
Oh yeah, definitely the Elliott Smith thing for sure. And sometimes I would get bothered by that, but I was impressed by it. I mean, I enjoyed it. I thought it was fine. They've got their sound is similar to other bands out there for sure, but there was just something just kind of charming about it all. You know, I liked the mixture of their two voices, even though, you know, it's not like they're perfectly harmonizing, or, you know, they're not like a Haim. You know, I'm not trying to knock Haim necessarily, but
I will.
Well, you would say that they're better, at least, right, Dan? I mean,
yeah, I mean, but that's, you know, I mean, Haim that was the worst song I've ever heard in my life.
This band sounds like the Shags if they actually were good, right, Dan? I mean,
no,
that's not a bad description.
That's
I mean,
fair.
when you say good, you know, I mean good at playing their instruments. That's really not a bad description.
I don't know about that, but it is funny you bring up the Shags and the whole outsider art thing, because I noticed in looking up things about Girlpool, their first album, the cover of that references the most famous outsider artist, Henry Darger. So you know, maybe there is something to that.
Ooh, they just earned a few points in your book, huh?
Nah,
Yeah.
nah.
Maybe not one out of you know, another 1,000, maybe like 100. Right?
Yeah.
It's hard to defend because it really doesn't sound like anything new at all. I just feel like they're doing this in a really charming way, like you said, Darin. I mean, it doesn't overstay its welcome at all.
Right.
The whole record is like 28 minutes. Each song is like just a sweet, like very. This will be the second time I've used this stupid word, sing-alongable. Very sing-alongable. That's 3. I don't know. It was just like sort of a charming, you know how like charming became like a really, like everybody in the 90s, all these like little indie twee things. They were trying to be as charming as possible. It's got that quality, and actually they pull it off really well. And the songs are nicely written. And I don't know. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed singing along to it. Maybe I could like suggest that, you know, I was talking about the emo thing, and, you know, early emo and indie have a lot in common. There's a lot of overlap there, but to me this was almost like a perfect split between the two things that I had almost like not really heard before. It's usually you can like listen to one of these bands, you can go, oh yeah, we'll put that in the emo file, that'll go in the indie file. This was like a little bit, I don't know, it was like a mixture that was maybe new to me, even though it sounds like it totally could have come out in 1995.
Yeah, I would definitely, you know, agree with you on that point. Like it does have some similarities to, you know, indie bands of the 90s or whatever, but I think it does just enough to keep it interesting. You know, the short songs are definitely welcomed, you know. The fact that I don't know if they survived 2017, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I'm going to come back to this record really, but not every single BNM that comes out has to survive 2017. You know, there was plenty of records in 2016 that I enjoyed during that year.
But see,
probably won't come back to.
That's an interesting philosophical question. How do you feel about that? Should every BNM record like be good enough to, you know, carry on?
I kind of think so. I feel like the albums that you're saying, these are the best albums of the year. They should continue to be good, you know. I mean, when you hear something like a couple times, you're like, I didn't mind listening to that. That's not a good album. That's like an okay album, you know. Like something that's a good album is something that you've like added to your repertoire of records that you listen to. You know, it doesn't mean you have to listen to it once a month, once a week or anything. But I mean, you know, it's got to be something that in 2-3 years you have the desire to listen to again. Whereas like something like this, I mean, what staying power does this have? I mean, it could have been recorded in 1995. It could have been recorded in 2017. It adds absolutely nothing. No one will remember this album next year, much less 5 years from now. Like there's no way this album is in any way remembered.
Yeah, that's hard to argue against. I mean, Darin, is that a bad way to define BNMs? Is like they ought to be something that enters your sort of personal collection of stuff that you love, you know, from here on out? Or you really feel like it can be just a one and done year-wise thing?
I think it could be one and done, you know, and I think anything that's lower than probably like an 8.8 kind of fits into that realm. I mean, there's no way that like 50 albums out of the year are going to become part of my repertoire, you know, in the years to come. I'll give you an example. I loved that Courtney Barnett album that came out, what was it, 2015, I think?
So you don't even remember.
Listen to it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but I listened to it a ton. Now, if I threw it on tomorrow, I'd be like, yeah, this is great. I enjoyed it, but it's not like I don't know. I don't feel like it should take anything away from it just because like I don't have a hankering to want to listen to it 2 years later. You know what I mean?
But I mean, I feel like that's
between
just
you
you
guys.
having like a skewed, rating system. Like you give out the 8 point whatever a little easier. I feel like something that's like
But
not.
you're the guy who gives a 10. You're the guy who gives
loose,
a 10 to
Darin.
the Shags and a 10 to
Let's
the
not
10 to everything.
Let's not get into that. But
Yeah. Okay. Well, so let's talk about it. An 8.3 BNM. I mean, that's Pitchfork. That's basically the lowest. I think they've given like 8.2s and maybe like one 8.1 BNM in their whole existence. But that's basically the lowest BNM they hand out. Could that be a nice compromise between you two? Can you both shake hands and agree on an 8.3?
It's a perfect score, Dan. Come on.
I would maybe divide that by 2. I think I would give this album.
God, I fucking hate you.
I'm giving this album a 4. It's making the world a little worse. It doesn't need to exist.
Wow.
God damn.
You know?
Wow.
That
was completely unexpected.
It was like bad. This album is bad. This is a bad album. I never want to hear it again. I honestly can't really think of anything nice to say. I kind of like their name. It's like a nice pun on Whirlpool. But which is not, I didn't know I wanted that. But yeah,
But
I mean, this is
art, man.
But this isn't outsider art. Maybe they knew Henry Darger, which is everyone knows that. But they're not gonna buy my love, with that, anyways. But yeah, I mean, this album has no reason to exist whatsoever.
God.
This is even something that, like, okay, yeah, maybe if they were like a local band, you went to a bar and you heard them, it would be too bad. But I think they would be bad. I would leave wherever I was if they were playing.
you would leave before the headliner came out.
I would leave. This is bad. This is a bad album. They should not make any more of them.
Oh my God!
God.
Please
Okay,
retire.
enough. All right,
Turn his mic.
enough, Dan. Jesus. Yeah, I mean, I think an 8.3 is like the perfect score, like Darin said. It's basically the lowest BNM. I mean, that's great for this. And I kind of feel like the way I felt about Slowdive, which is that it's just sort of a treat.
Right.
Like, it's just sort of a nice record. And I guess I'm okay with BNMing stuff like that. Like, if we were doing like a, I don't know, like best new snacks, like a Chips Ahoy cookie would be like a best new snack because it's just a little cookie. It's nice, and this is kind of what this is. So
That's
did that make
no,
any
but
sense?
further.
No, I have no idea why.
No, I don't either.
It's just a little treat. I'm like carrying on the treat metaphor, and it's like, it's just a nice little treat, and I don't think it has to be like something I'm going to listen to 40 years from now to be worthy of like a BNM.
Maybe that.
Do you still love Chips Ahoy cookies though? Ooh.
Yeah, best new treat. Chips Ahoy, hand me a Chips Ahoy cookie. That's a best new treat. You're getting a BNT for that.
But maybe that analogy is good though, because I do not like Chips Ahoy cookies. So
Oh, God, you have the worst taste ever. Don't
that's
even.
true. So maybe
You're just going to embarrass
maybe that's
yourself
true.
on the podcast.
I just got the finer taste in things. I can't eat this kind of garbage.
All right. I think we've done enough hurt to Girlpool, or you have more specifically.
Yeah, well, they deserve it. But before we move on to the next album, we just want to remind you to hit that subscribe button and help us out a lot by leaving us a nice review in the iTunes store or telling a friend about the podcast. And of course, thanks to everyone who's already done those things. Also, email, tweet, or Facebook message us. You can follow along with Pitchfork's reviews and email us your thoughts on the albums we'll be discussing, or ask us about anything at all. You can do that, metaphoricmusic@gmail.com. All the social media stuff is at Metaphoric Music. So let's hear a bit of that Sunday classic.
I kept feeding her money till shit started to make sense. Who could ever foresee? We used to stay up all night at slumber parties. Now I'm trying to rock his bitch to sleep. All the years we were real close. Now I see his fears through her tears. No, she wishing we were still close. Don't cry, it is the beat. In time, I take away your miseries and make it mine. The evil still gone. I wonder, can you save me?
All right, you just heard a clip from our Sunday classic this week, Jay-Z's Reasonable Doubt, which was released by Rockefeller Records. Sunday got a 9.4 in a review by Jason Green. This record was originally released in 1996. Reasonable Doubt was Jay-Z's debut album, as I think everybody probably knows, and while it initially achieved limited financial and critical success, the record was soon recognized as a bona fide hip-hop classic. It's now one of East Coast rap's defining albums. It's often called one of the best albums of the 90s in general, and it introduced the world to Jay-Z, who's remained one of pop culture's most iconic figures ever since. In a way, this is what makes the record so special. Jay had set his sights on world domination even while working as a low-level hustler throughout the 80s and early 90s, but he repeatedly failed to secure a record deal. Ever the entrepreneur, Jay solved the problem by forming his own record company, Rockefeller Records, like I said, and straight up used dope money to lure big-name producers and guest rappers like DJ Premier and the Notorious B.I.G. to the project. It wasn't the first mafioso rap record, but Reasonable Doubt did help popularize the idea of taking traditional gangster rap themes and turning them into a grand cinematic mobster tale along the lines of The Godfather or Scarface. As such, this record is known and celebrated for its shockingly grim street narratives in which Jay confesses that dealing drugs has basically fucked up his entire inner psyche. Ironically, over the next few albums, Jay would slowly replace all of that darkness with unabashed celebrations of fame and wealth, and while this would help elevate him and hip-hop in general to enormous mainstream success, many hardcore hip-hop fans miss the introspective hustler who made Reasonable Doubt. So what is your guys' previous opinion about Jay-Z and this album?
I love Jay-Z, and I love this album already.
I don't like Jay-Z.
What?
I think he's weak. You know, I listened to watch The Throne only because Kanye was on there.
I mean, I'll give you Kanye's better.
Expand on this weak word that you've just used. What do you mean weak?
I've never felt like every like guest appearance that he appears on in every song that I've ever heard, and even his hit singles, like he just doesn't hit the way somebody like Biggie hits, even Tupac. The way Kanye hits, it just doesn't hit me like that. So I was really interested in checking this out because, especially based on, your little description here about how he was like this introspective hustler with blah, blah, blah. But
I hope you're not making fun of that shit.
No, I'm not. I'm just.
It sure sounded like it.
We'll get into it. We will get into it. We'll get into it.
This is fucked up.
Yeah, it really is.
I'm going to get as mad as I got at Dan for that review. But, no, I love Jay-Z. I mean, I think he's like one of the GOATs. I think literally no smart person would deny that.
That was good.
He's just great, and he's totally fallen off, and everybody will agree to that. He's fallen off.
He should have left after the Black Album, like he was gonna. That would have been best.
I don't see a difference.
I agree, but I really like his contributions to Watch the Throne. I feel like Kanye pushed him to be extra great on that record. But the Black Album was sort of the end of like his great first run. I'll complain about this a little bit more, but he's like always had this sort of, he's like too concerned with scoring a pop hit a little bit, but he's still just one of the greatest rappers there is, and I love this album. I am kind of one of the people that's like, sometimes wishes he would just rap like this again, which he sort of never completely did. But let's try to describe the sound of this record. And I guess when we describe the sound, we got to think about production, but we also got to think about lyrics. So let's do production first. What does this record sound like?
I really want to hear what Darin thinks, if he thinks it's so weak.
Well, I mean, production-wise, it's got...
Sounds weak.
It sounds like a hip-hop record from the 90s.
Okay, all right.
All right.
No, I mean...
You nailed it.
Well... you've got your like, God, I don't know how really else to describe it.
I mean, it's the same dude who did like several beats on Illmatic. So it like, and I think Jay was doing that on purpose. And it basically sounds like one of those classic East Coast,
right?
Records, I guess is what you're trying to say.
Yeah. Like it. Yeah. There's nothing I could say that would sound any different than, because like even elements of like Biggie's records, it sounds like that's what Jay-Z was after, and at this point, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't sound like he was breaking new ground necessarily.
Yeah, well, he hadn't met Kanye yet, and
how would you describe the sound, Dan?
Nah, yeah, I mean, I laughed a little bit when Darin said, it sounds like a 90s rap record, but it really does. I mean, it has that like classic East Coast feel to it. It's not dissimilar from Nas or Biggie or anything.
Yeah. But when we say classic, I mean, I think we really mean it. Even Darin, who's a fucking hater, can admit that the beats sound like classic.
Yeah,
when you
no,
put this on, it sounds like
this
classic.
is prototypical, East Coast.
Right. I'm not
90s
denying
rap.
this at all.
Good. I would hope not.
He just hates East Coast rap, I guess.
Yeah, I guess fucking
No,
so.
I just don't like Jay-Z.
All right. Well, we do get like a lot of sort of R&B type hooks scattered throughout here, particularly on like the first song. There's a lot of, I don't know, it's like sort of like, I guess we could sort of transition to talking about the lyrics and stuff, but just sort of the sound of the way he raps is sort of like that fast paced, like smart, kind of like East Coast Illmatic style kind of rapping. But there's a lot of like hookiness to this. Would you guys disagree with that?
No, I wouldn't at all. And,
Not like Illmatic, which has like no attempt at making a pop single at all.
yeah, exactly. Or something like Only Built for Cuban Links, like Cuban Links is another one of these like mafioso, it's a cinematic story thing, but nothing really on Cuban Links is like, this is a pure radio, smash hit.
Right.
I think Jay-Z, like he made something similar, but I mean, there's some things on here that are, Can't Knock the Hustle sounds like a song on the radio, that can be played on the radio.
He's got his eye on that.
Well, and are you also like suggesting like having a singer appear and sing a hook here and there, like, is that?
But that's not. I mean, Cuban Links does that as well, and so does some of the other things. That was just kind of a '90s hip hop kind of thing to do.
Yeah, but it's quite catchy, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
and then if we transition to talking about the lyrics, which here comes Darin, pissing on our parade, I'm sure, but. If we want to describe the lyrics, I mean, I think it's hard to describe sort of because, a lot of people celebrate it because it's quite dark. That part on The Evils where he's talking about like, he's kidnapping this dude's, baby's mama or whatever. And he's like stuffing dollars into her mouth to like keep her from crying or whatever. And sort of like reflecting on like, I'm sure she wishes that me and him were still close. And, he talks about shit like him and his friends don't talk anymore because they're all like so obsessed with getting money. And he talks about, even in that song, he talks about like, he sort of implies like, I'll take away your pain and make it mine. Like when I kill you, I'm gonna have to live with that forever or something. Like it's dark as fuck, but we also get like little hints at the Jay-Z we will all soon, big pimpin' Jay-Z, where he's like sort of celebrating that Lexus, that Cristal stuff. It's just here it's sort of balanced with this like introspective, like all this bling is meant to cover up like my really shitty life.
But you really believe that though? Like I just don't feel like that it's genuine. When you listen,
how is it not genuine? He literally was like a drug dealer. Like this album is.
I'm not denying what maybe the facts of his life are, but I'm just saying the way that it comes across he doesn't seem as good of a storyteller as like Biggie was. You know what I mean? I don't feel convinced because he does do these like bragging moments where he's just talking about how he's this and he's that and he's got the cars and the whatever. I mean,
I'll agree with you. I mean, you want to say I'll agree. Biggie is a better storyteller than Jay-Z, but that doesn't mean Jay-Z sucks like you're implying. I mean,
Biggie might be a better storyteller, but he's like, it's like Beatles and Velvet Underground, like rating them or whatever. This is still like one of the greatest storytellers in rap history, I think. And I think I get what you're saying, Darin, is that there's like too much of the Cristal stuff, and just like a couple speckles of the dark introspective, like you listen to this and often you hear about it like, oh, it's super dark, it's super real, it's like totally real look at like his life as a hustler. And then you're kind of surprised that there are like a good 4 songs that are sort of about that directly, although it does sort of pop up here and there in a line or whatever. But I kind of get what you're saying, and yet I think it works really well because when you listen to it, you know that when he's like sort of celebrating his flashy lifestyle, he's like underneath it are those like really dark things. It sort of complements each other well. He doesn't need to talk about dark shit every song.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it's almost like the wealth and bling and stuff is like a Band-Aid for, that darkness.
And it's like, when Kanye is like talking about how awesome he is on like Power or something, we learned from some lines in that song and some other songs throughout My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy that he's like really fucked up and emotionally,
it's
on edge. And so then when you re-listen to Power, it has like this new, level of meaning, which is like he's just sort of pretending or trying to convince himself. It like becomes extra interesting. I think this album works the same way.
Yeah, I agree with you completely there.
What? No, I can't even believe you would. I get what you're saying about My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, but it's totally different. Like the way Kanye brags about things versus the way Jay-Z brags about things and his delivery of that is totally different. Like, Kanye's talking about being this, he's like this overlord, this amazing, one-of-a-kind artist that is, beyond anyone else's imagination, whereas Jay-Z's just saying, I got more, zeros after one, you know what I mean? Like, I got more digits to my name than anybody else, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's, he's trying to talk,
okay,
and he does that throughout his entire career. And, like, Watch the Throne is such a perfect example of that because it clashes so bad against, like, what Kanye's coming
All right. But I think that's kind of charming about this album, which is like, he's not big pimpin' Jay-Z yet. Like, he can't afford to, fly him and his friends out to the Bahamas to shoot a, $1 million music video. He's just sort of like bragging about like the kind of shit that low-level hustlers brag about. Like, he just has enough money to like have a nice car and, buy some like fancy drinks. Like, it's kind of charming because it's not top of the world Jay-Z. It's sort of like just a dude with, pretty good money compared to the other people in his neighborhood. And he feels really great about himself and he's bragging about it. But then he's got all these like insecurities because the shit he had to do to get that money was really fucked up and sort of torturing him. I mean, this is the realest that Jay-Z has ever had to be, or like our only glimpse into the real Jay-Z, because immediately after this, he turns into like such an incomprehensible like icon that with so much money that he can never be relatable again.
This is pre-mentioning Picasso in every single verse. Jay-Z,
Rothko's surrounding him.
I don't know. You say that this is the real Jay-Z, but the majority of his career is.
All right, well, quit fucking trashing this album for the rest of his career. I know you don't like Big Pimpin', even though that's a really hot song.
Really
I gotta
is,
admit. But
all right, well, I'll take issue with
what can you say about this album?
The coming of age song. He's talking about driving around with this guy, and it is just like cringeworthy the way they're talking about like, hey, yo, man, let me give you $1,000. Nah, man, you don't need to give me $1,000. Like,
all right,
you know what I mean? Like,
it's not a highlight of the album for sure.
Okay, but you both are like, this is an obvious 10. It's not an obvious 10. It's not.
Well, it's a little too long. Would you agree with that, Dan? There's some
yeah, I mean, it's a little too long.
Mostly when he's getting his friends to do guest verses.
Exactly. I mean, it's a little too long. It's got all these skits, but that is 90s. That's the kind of thing you have to say.
Hates that.
It's in 90s rap. Every 90s rap album is too long, and it has skits. You just, it's a product of the time. You have to, look past it, I guess. But I mean, this is an obvious thing. I mean, just for it to spawn somebody like Jay-Z. I mean, Jay-Z is. I mean, it's crazy to go from a guy who was like literally like this album was made from him selling drugs on the street, and then now I saw an article today. Him and Beyonce together are worth $1.12 billion. A billion with a B. $1 billion.
So happy for them.
God,
like to go from
it's incredible.
I mean, it is. I mean, to go from the streets to, I mean, he's like BFFs with President Obama. I mean, he's hanging out at the White House and stuff.
He basically embodies the American dream.
It really is. Yeah,
like our current day, like the American dream.
It really is. Yeah.
So it's cool to hear him when he's like a nobody, just like these small successes and these dark things he's had to do. That's kind of cool, right, Darin?
He doesn't sound like a nobody, though. He doesn't.
But well, there you go. That's why he's so good. That even when he is a nobody, he still sounds
he's so good.
He still sounds like a billionaire.
What are you guys drinking?
Yeah, because he feels like a billionaire. Because he got a cool bottle of Cristal, and now he feels like.
What is that thing, like The Secret, where you just like, if you imagine it, you'll get it.
Yeah,
Jay-Z, proof it works. Proof it works.
That's Jay-Z all the way. That is Jay-Z all the way. Yeah. Okay. So I guess we should talk about the score. It was kind of shocking to me that Pitchfork gave this a 9.4.
Me too. Yeah.
I mean, most people would call this like a guaranteed 10 out of 10. And yeah, there's some problems. And I feel like every great Jay-Z album has some problems. Like they're either too long, he's too obsessed with getting like a pop hit. Even like The Blueprint has that really like unfortunate Eminem song, which is
Renegade.
Sort of a bad,
I like that song.
But does it fit on that?
Yeah,
album
maybe
at
not.
all?
Well, originally it was with somebody else, which, man, off the top of my head, I can't remember. But he got in a beef or something with that person, and they like switched it out with this Eminem thing. If I remember correctly, like first pressings have the original song, or it might be like early releases, but
it's just sort of like it doesn't belong, and it's just sort of like, and then Nas makes fun of him because Eminem sort of kills him on his own song.
True, yeah.
It's because their styles don't mix at all. I don't know. Anyway, so there's like there's some problem with every great Jay-Z record, but you can almost overlook it because he's so fucking excellent. In that first run, his couple classics. I mean, he's like an incredible storyteller. I love that he gets like dark here. I love like he's like he's like basically as smart as a conscious rapper, but he talks about like real gangster shit. So it's like this perfect combination of that. I mean, he's smart as fuck, but he's not talking about like lame shit like whatever liberation of reading books or whatever. But I don't know how you can't give this a 10. It's a 10.
Yeah.
It's like one of the best albums of all of hip hop.
No, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, just the fact that it spawns the career of Jay-Z, who is like, you can't argue that. I mean, I guess Darin can, but you really can't argue that he's not one of like the greats of the genre.
Yeah.
I mean, he's one of those people that like, I mean, the last great Jay-Z album is the Black Album. Watch the Throne too, but we won't count that one because Kanye helps a lot. But I mean, he's one of those people like Eminem, who's like released kind of a lot of shitty albums like after their great stuff, but it's just like I mean, but it's Jay-Z, so who gives a shit if Magna Carta Holy Grail sucks?
He's earned it forever.
He's earned it.
Like it can never be taken away.
Exactly. So I mean, that alone like makes this album a 10.
All right, dare I ask, Darin, what you're going to give this record?
Look, I know I've been shitting on this record quite a bit, but I will say that
you're ready to apologize.
I will say that the beats were good. I didn't actually 100% hate having to listen to this, but you guys are sort of you're actually working my argument here because like Jay-Z just doesn't have, to me, listening to a full album of Jay-Z, I just can't do it. He does make some okay guest appearances, in recent years and whatever. But when I put on like this entire Jay-Z record, I'm tired of Jay-Z. Like I can't get through it. He doesn't have this sort of like staying power that like Kanye West does. He doesn't have like the theatrics that like a Kanye West has. You know what I mean? Like it's just not even close. You want to know what I would give this score? You ready for this?
No.
I'm giving it a 6.5.
Oh my god.
Oh my
You could send your applications to be a host, metaphoricmusic at gmail.com. We're taking them. Must be Jay-Z fan.
Must be Jay-Z.
Why did we let him have the last word?
Yeah, you really shouldn't. We won't let him. I mean, every Jay-Z album... Every Jay-Z album, you said it's hard to listen to a full Jay-Z. I don't agree with that at all. Every Jay-Z album, up until the Black Album, maybe minus Volume 3, Life and Times of Sean Carter, is at least very good, if not great. I mean, the Blueprint and the Black Album, and Reasonable Doubt, are three of the like greatest rap albums ever.
It doesn't sound like anything you guys have said have the qualities of a 10 though, even though you're just saying it's got to be a 10. But you're sitting here admitting that there are problems.
What do you mean?
You sat
There are some problems, but it's like that's just how Jay-Z is, and he just happens to be like one of the greatest that's ever done it. I mean, he's like The Evils is the like darkest hip hop song I've ever heard. It's like so fucking real, and the beat is fucking awesome. It's just like I don't know, he kills it. He's like an incredible storyteller. He's incredibly introspective. Like I said, he's smart as fuck. He's also, you know, he's interested. I think he just like sort of stumbles sometimes because he's always thinking about like, will this work on the radio or not? And sometimes that gets a little bit too much, but he's just like, I don't know, just like that phrase, politics as usual. Like, it's just cool as fuck.
No.
When he says it, it's cool as fuck. And it's like just a cool ass line that you can like sort of quote to yourself or quote to your friends, I don't know, in the 90s or whatever. It's just like a perfect, one of those great lines. Like, it's like
It really is.
a hook that is just a phrase, which is awesome. You know, he's fantastic. He's just, I don't know. Why am I defending Jay-Z? It's fucking Jay-Z, Darin. It's Jay-Z.
No.
You know who Jay-Z is?
Yeah, I know who Jay-Z is.
My God, doesn't that just end the argument and then just speak for itself? It's Jay-Z made this album.
It doesn't.
You know,
it doesn't.
this is his
I think
first
I
album.
think the fact that you guys have to make all of this argument to
Only because you're here. If it was just me and Gabe, we would say Jay-Z, one of the greatest, and we'd say
yeah.
I agree, and we would move on. We'd move on to the next round.
Man, damn. All right. Well, I don't know. We're not making any headway here. So, do we have enough time to play a game?
Nah, I think we went a little long. We'll hold that game that I've been sitting on for like 12 weeks now. That's every week it makes less and less sense because it was completely based around whatever episode I wrote it for. But next week's show we've got that Jalen BNM, and as well as we'll talk about Chris Cornell and Soundgarden. Maybe Darin likes them. Who knows? But go ahead and subscribe. You can do that on iTunes, pretty much any podcast app, or you can listen in the browser, metaphoricmusic.com. Email us your thoughts. Send your hate mail to Darin, metaphoricmusic@gmail.com. Stay connected, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, all of that junk. It is at Metaphoric Music, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.
So long.